Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Annika, and I use she, her pronouns. And it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for our October Book Art Series, Pamela Harris Lawton, who is a fifth-generation educator from Washington, D.C., is the Florence Gaskins Harper Endowed Chair in Art Education at the Maryland Institute College of Art. She holds a BA degree in studio arts as sociology, an MFA in printmaking, and an EDD in the college teaching of art. Lawton's scholarly research and teaching revolve around visual narrative and intergenerational arts learning in BIPOC community settings. Her artwork, grounded in social liberation, seeks to illuminate contemporary issues, cultural traditions, and the stories of people impacted by them. She co-authored the book Community-Based Art Education Across the Lifespan, Finding Common Ground, has numerous journal and book chapter publications, presentations, and exhibitions. For Pamela's talk, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat throughout the talk, and after Pamela's presentation, I will moderate the questions, and I will now turn it over to Pamela.
Okay, thank you for coming. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully everybody can see this. Okay, so let me just kind of minimize myself. All right, so thank you for coming to the talk. As an artist, educator, working primarily as a printmaker and book and mixed media artist, my teaching centers around community-based art education with participants of all ages. And community-based art education is a means of teaching art and craft skills, connecting diverse groups around common human themes, beautifying and conserving spaces, healing unsettled communities, providing opportunities for the silence to be heard, which is an important thing for this project, and the invisible seen, and celebrating the unique traditions and cultural heritage of different groups of people. So I believe the arts can be a powerful and invaluable tool in narrowing the cultural divide to create more inclusive and equitable communities. Sharing stories while making art is an excellent way of building community. I coined the term art stories, which is in the title of this talk, to describe one's personal quest for identity and meaning through art and story, or alternatively, as a group's collaborative search for communal, intergenerational, and multicultural understanding through shared oral histories, collaboratively written identity pieces on life themes, and visual treatments of these themes created by the group, in this case, an artist's book. So let me go to the next page. Okay, so in 2019, I was selected as a Distinguished Chair Fulbright Scholar at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. At the time, I was teaching at Virginia Commonwealth University, and President Trump was 2 years into his presidency. BIPOC and other marginalized groups of American citizens were targets of aggressions at levels not experienced since the Civil Rights era. Other Western democracies began to follow suit, expanding nationalist sentiments and threatening to deport immigrants. Sound familiar? So at that time, Brexit was in the works. It was on the horizon, and all of that kind of entered into my application for the Fulbright. I was interested particularly in working with immigrant communities on the topics of social justice and using artist books as a medium. So if you look here at this slide, BME youth is the term that, or BME is the term that they use in the UK for BIPOC. So it means Black, minority, ethnic. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so my Fulbright was for 6 months, January to June in 2019. And it really wasn't a lot of time for me to sort of find, meet, and collaborate with a group to make art addressing idea concepts, idea meaning inclusion, diversity, equity, and access. So my university contact there in Scotland suggested that I work with a group called SCORE Scotland. It was a small charity located in the Wester Hailes suburb of Edinburgh. And she suggested that I work with participants of the participants there in that group were youth, so they were aged 12 to 19. And the group had a setting in the Wester Hales art organization called the Whale Art Center. So they were in a building that had a big arts presence. So I met with the director, and she suggested I sit in on one of the after school meetings that they had to kind of meet the youth that would be a part of the project. And it was really difficult, I have to say, because that meeting that I attended, they had a councilwoman from the community there. And the councilwoman was asking them questions like, how are you doing? What sorts of things are you experiencing? And these are young people, and to hear them say that they were subjects of racial microaggressions from not only other students, but their teachers, members of the community where they lived, it was pretty heartbreaking. So I began to think, wow, the books that they're going to make are going to be pretty sad. And I was thinking, well, you know, maybe they need to have that outlet. But I was a little bit worried about how that would come out. So it was great to get to meet them. And despite them being located in this art center, they really did not make any art. So I thought, well, this is a good opportunity for that. So what you see here is me with the students in the art space, and they're making decorative paper for their books. And along with me is Jing Zhu, who was a doctoral student at the university who was assisting me with this. So in addition to the Fulbright, I also received a grant from the National Art Education Foundation to cover the cost of the supplies that you see the students using, and my assistant Jing, as well as documentation of the project with a photographer and a videographer. So that was really helpful because I had the supplies shipped right there. We had 5 sessions with the youth once a week for 5 weeks on a Saturday. And we started with like a word web exercise for them on the big idea of belonging, you know, what that meant to them, to help them generate the content and visualize what they wanted their books to be. I also shared with them a couple of books I had done in other community settings with other youth. And one was an accordion abecedarian book or alphabet book that they created about their community. And the students really, really liked that idea. So most of them decided they wanted to create a accordion book. And so what you see is I did a lot of kind of fun things with them to get them into the process. We did paste paper. We used soap bubbles and food coloring to make bubble paper and marble paper with shaving cream. And they just really, that kind of helped them feel very joyful about what they were doing. And again, I wasn't sure what was going to come out when they started thinking about this theme of belonging. So I had several examples, as I said, of books for them to look at, and they all kind of decided on the same sort of accordion format, and some decided to do alphabet books, and you can see one there in the background where you see the U and the W. Some decided to tell a story about their life, what they hoped their life would be. Others took their name and the letters of their name and used that to speak to something about their identity. So they all took different approaches with it, but they were all really happy to work on a project where they could just express their own interests and actually positivity, rather than focus on the racial aggressions that they were subject to daily from the community and their teachers and so forth. So what you see here, this was one of the oldest students, and I wish I could remember everyone's name, holding the book that says My Life. And I was so fascinated with her because she wanted to be, I think, a hammer throw. She wanted to do the hammer throw in the Olympics. I wish I could say that I have kept touch with all these students, but I haven't. I would love to know. They're now, you know, adults. So I'd be curious to know how their lives are right now. So as with any community-based project, once the artworks are complete, there should be a celebration and sharing of the work. So in addition to an event that we had there at the center where they invited their parents and their family, and we had food, and they got to read from their books and talk about the process and what they got out of it, I had made contact with the librarian, the artist books librarian at the Edinburgh College of Art. And I said, hey, you know, I've got these students that I've been working with who've made these amazing books. And she said, oh, I'd love to have them on display here. So what was a fun side note is the students had never been to the college, to the university at all. So it was amazing for them to go into this space and see their work. And as Jing and I were preparing to set up the exhibition, I contacted a former student of mine from the Corcoran who happened to be living in Glasgow. She moved there and she was an art teacher. So I called her and she came over and she helped me put the exhibition together, which was a nice thing to reconnect with her. And the books were on display, I think, for about a month. And so they all got to take a little field trip over to see the books and, you know, to know that people on the college campus were going to be encountering them. So what I have here is it's 9 minutes. I hope it's not too long, but you know, my talk is rather short, really. This is the film that the videographer and made of the students talking about their experience with the project.
Art Stories is an opportunity for people to find their common ground through different art forms. I have been interested in learning about people's ways of thinking when they're working through art with people they don't know necessarily, and trying to find common ground with those people through their art stories, and that being them telling their stories in an artistic form. So I've been doing these projects since 2002, using a variety of different materials, from handmade books, which is what we did with this project, to woodcuts, to quilts. And I've just really enjoyed seeing people use art as a way of expressing what they think about the world, what they think is important, and how they learn to get along with other people in the process of making with them. The conversations that they have as they're in the process of creating things is what bridges people and establishes a common ground. It helps you realize that, oh, the things that I want out of life, they're very similar to what you want out of life. So there really isn't that much difference between us. You know, we have the same desires and interests and concerns. And so I feel like finding ways for people to do that, have those conversations in an unstructured sort of way while they're engaged in an art making activity is kind of a sneaky way of getting people to talk about things. And I wanted to do it here in the UK because I've been interested in comparing the sorts of thoughts and ways people live and the things they think about in the UK and contrast that with people that I've been working with in the United States. So it was interesting for me to be here in Scotland, and in particular here in Western Hales, where you have people from all different sorts of countries that have come together in this one space and are trying to negotiate relationships with each other. So for me, that was an interesting additional aspect to the project.
I joined it because we're gonna write about stories, so that's what I love more. So the people understand more and more like what you're doing. When I come to the club, I feel like more relaxing because I like coloring and do like new things and try new stuff.
It's really fun. Like we got to like decorate our paper and everyone's nice. I like mixing them.
Young people need encouragement and the opportunity to speak their truth. This is often difficult when their truths revolve around emotional issues of belonging, self-confidence, power, and privilege. for Black and minority ethnic youth struggling to make sense of a world in which they are systemically oppressed for being other. Their voices are often ignored or considered irrelevant. Creative outlets like art stories can empower you and amplify their voices in ways that bring attention to the inequities and difficulties they live under daily.
My book's like an alphabet, so it's like different things, like small sentences about things, like the community and what you should do and what people are able to do and what they're capable of. People don't have to be what others want them to be, and they can do what they want. If you're not yourself, then you won't be happy with your life because you'll always be thinking, oh, I have to do this because of that. Even though I don't want to, I could do something else and be happy about it.
Every letter of my name stands for something. Today, you can make a change. Try and help those who need help. I said, I should let you know that you're amazing and beautiful, and you make someone smile every day because you're alive. I did the inspirational quotes, which is by me. Being yourself is the best medicine you can ever taste. If you feel thousands of times, keep going. Making a photocopy of someone doesn't make you cool. So I've got here a picture that says creativity, and then this one says colorful. This one says lively since it has music and dancing. This one is like stories done by art. And then this one's patterns. This one's bold. This one says nature. I did it with my name and like just some random words. Marvelous, oath, marble, irresistible, irresistible and noble, adventurous.
Nice. And that's Mama now.
My book is about but I think my life is gonna be like, I want to be in the Olympics. It starts when I was 6, when I started athletics. I started with running and then started doing throwing 2 years ago.
I like to draw dinosaurs and anatomies. And just because my dad likes them, he teaches me all about dinosaurs.
And apparently education is of importance to you.
And you like to draw.
And art, there's something way down there about art.
I'm still like traditional, drawing with pencils, 5 times a week or so.
My idea is new words for the book from the alphabetical order, like illusion, dog. Someone didn't know the word. There's like a weird description in the bottom, like what it means, what it is, or how would you do it, how to use it. Mine is gonna talk about bullying and like don't bully people. That's what I have been doing. My story is like gonna be about like don't be sad, happy. It's an important thing for me. I'm gonna write in Arabic and in English.
This group was amazing to work with because I had never really worked with so many students from different backgrounds. I had students from different African countries, Middle Eastern countries, and I found that really fascinating, just learning about them, seeing how they got along with each other and helped each other with their art making. And they're so thoughtful. The things that they wanted to tell in their stories weren't just always about them, but things that they felt people should think about when they're interacting with other people, how to treat other people. And I think that that's what we want our young people to grow into. And they have that in them and they're sharing that. And I found that very powerful.
When I first met the Score Scotland youth, they talked about racist micro and macroaggressions they experienced with peers, community members, and teachers. Through art stories, they were able to reflect on their experiences, both negative and positive, to create stories of hope and healing. I am pleased that Score Scotland sees the value of the arts as a tool of empowerment to personal expression and plans to continue with art stories.
I obviously love making art and making art with others as a sociable person, as a social activity, a social and learning activity. It's a way of making meaning, making friends, understanding people, and building community. That's what it's really about for me. It's finding ways to build community. And oftentimes with people who might not normally encounter the people that they're encountering as part of the Art Stories project, and getting to learn about other people who might live not far from them, and to find out what they have in common. So for me, that's a real.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there and go to the next thing. So after finishing up my Fulbright in June, I had been selected by VCU to be their representative at the Tate Exchange in London. So I did an Art Stories Tate altered book project there. So basically what I did was, while I was in Scotland, which is a very literary city, I bought like 35 old books written from a master narrative perspective. And the idea was to have people coming to visit the Tate Exchange space on the 5th floor, alter those books with social justice counter narratives in them. So if you don't know what the Tate Exchange is, honestly, this is totally short. Let's see.
Welcoming,
joyous, non-traditional,
experimental.
Tate Exchange is an emerging ecosystem.
Tate Exchange is the floor here at Tate Modern. It's an invitation to the public to explore a different way of interacting with art through workshops, performances, talks.
You can come and discover something completely different to just paintings hanging up.
we get hands-on with making and doing and playing and creating, using art as a starting point. We think about what we could do to change things in the world today. There's a big opportunity to reach out to people. It's so important that people have this space to call their own. And I think it's a space that throws open what art is, what art can do.
Tate Exchange is inclusive,
Collaborative,
encouraging,
courageous.
Absolutely invaluable.
Okay, so basically, VCU, which is where I was teaching at the time, was the only non-UK partner in the Tate Exchange. And the Tate Exchange was in existence from 2016 to 2021. So it's no longer a program there. But the 5th floor of the museum was turned into this space for people coming to visit, just to come upstairs, see what's going on and participate. And so they had several different institutions as partners, and each institution had a week to send a group and a representative, someone to do a community-based project in that space. So I was the last person for that particular year, 2019, and there was a theme of movement for that year, and it was based on the Tate Exchange turbine artist Tanya Bruguera and what she was doing that year. So she was speaking with all of us about what she was going to do with the project in the turbine hall, and then we all got to think about how we wanted to use the theme of movement in our week-long residency. So I decided to approach the theme of movement through the metaphor of time, which is constantly moving, and through a social justice lens. So I wanted participants to consider how their past impacted their present and how their present actions will impact the future. As I mentioned, I had bought all these books and found one for myself to work with, which was just kind of a really great thing to do. So I started altering a book myself to also show as an example. And as I say, you don't know who's going to come in that week. And I was there in July. So like the middle of July that week, I was on the 5th floor. And of course, that's when children are out of school. So I had probably more people come in during the week that I was there than most of the resident artists did. So I had to have something that would be appealing to families and children. So what I wound up doing was I had the altered books, and you can see some pictures there of the books that I selected. And those were to stay at the museum. So people would come in, I would cut out pages from the books that they wanted to work with. They would work on the page, and I would stick them back in the book to eventually be reattached inside the book. I then had a whole like little one-page book thing, like how you can take a one page and fold it up so it creates this little 6-page book. And that was something that I had for kids and families to work on and then take away with them. So it was quite hectic in there because we were doing the paper decorative techniques with the shaving cream and the bubbles and the paste. And so it was a whole lot of stuff happening. So I was very thankful that VCU agreed to send one of my graduate students to come and work with me. I had 1,800 people in the span of 5 days come in and create books. And there were 36 books that were created. And you can see a little bit here of some of the books that were created by mostly adults, and then some of the little takeaway books that were created by kids and families. And one of my favorites is Mr. Dot on Holiday. These two girls came in, they had not seen each other. They were cousins. They got to see each other maybe once a year in the summer. And they had been through the museum and decided to create this little book about their visit, but through the lens of this character named Mr. Dot. And it was just so amazing. So as with everything, I felt like if people wanted to come back at the end of that 5-day period and talk about, what they created with the altered books, I had them there. And so I had a day at the end of this whole week where people did come back and they talked about the experience. And you can see a gentleman there, he had a whole, he took the book and just cut everything up and had stuff popping out of it. And he's talking about his experience doing that and his thinking. And so it was very interesting because people from all over the world were just visiting the Tate to experience that floor and what was on display in the galleries. So that was that particular project. And what wound up happening with those books is the Tate Britain wound up taking all those books and putting them into the library there. So I don't know, maybe one day I'll get back and go visit the library and just kind of take a look at them again. So some of what I felt like I got out of this was I was thinking about artist books as a collaborative form of artivism, using art to talk about issues connected to social justice as a act of activism, actually. And so it not only just helped the students that I worked with build studio skills and think creatively through a visual medium, but it also helped build community by people having conversations about what they were going to do with the book or what they thought about the context of the book they were altering. So it was also a form of public pedagogy. And it created a sort of supportive way for people to confront and discuss often difficult topics while they're working on art together. A lot of the people that I met there, several of them were staff members at the Tate, were very worried about their status. They were immigrants living in London and didn't know what would happen with them as a result of Brexit. So I just felt like the whole project was a little bit of positivity, a little bit of ways of people expressing their perspectives and, getting their feelings out in a way that was constructive and having conversations with others. So I'm going to stop sharing and open this up to comments or questions that people might have. I know I went through it pretty quickly since it's only about 7:30, but if you had some questions or you just want to chat, I'm here now.
Yeah, please feel free to ask questions or put them in the chat and I will relay them to Pamela. I guess while we're waiting for people to think, I can start off with a question. What advice do you have for other people who want to use book arts as a form of community engagement and community building?
That's a really excellent question. I do a lot of community work, and people ask me, well, how do you enter a community? What are the things that you do? And part of it is I look for somebody who I call a community connector, somebody who is connected to that community that I'm connected to and can give me some sort of introduction to them. And it was a little different with this project because I didn't know anyone, except for the faculty member who was working with me. And she then had those connections. So she knew the folks at SCORE Scotland, for example. And so it's really important to think about why you want to work with a particular community, what you hope that they will get out of it, not just what you'll get out of it, but what's your goal in working with that community. And if it's about, topics like this, like artivist sort of topics or difficult topics, or it could just be, you want them to learn a skill and have a chance to get introduced to the medium of book arts, for example, and have more people involved in that at a younger age or what have you. But I would say the most important thing is to think carefully about what community you want to work with and why you want to work with them, why they should be interested in what you want to do with them, and who might help, facilitate that first conversation or connection that you might want to have. And always, some people might want to do certain things that you aren't capable of doing or don't have the materials to do. So that's the other thing. Funding is often an issue for people. Like I say, I did get a small grant from the National Art Education Association. I think it was like $6,000. And that helped me have an assistant to help me, get the documentation from the videographers and buy the art supplies. And there were enough there that I left them, and the director did another Art Stories project afterwards, which I was thrilled about. So I think part of it is just asking the questions like, what is it you want to do? Who do you want to work with and why? And then just trying to have a conversation with them before you plan and do anything.
Great, thanks. I have a question in the chat. The question is, can you talk a bit more about the workshop you did as part of the UK residency, where you had 1,800 people over 5 days? Logistically, how did you pull that off? How did you handle the flow of people and ideas, for example?
Oh, I'll tell you, it was a crazy, chaotic craziness. I have lots more pictures where you can see like the exchange space was huge. It took up the entire floor, 5th floor of the Tate Modern. And people knew about it. They knew it was there. They had advertised this Art Stories project, like making books, down on the main floor. And so people came up to see what it was about. And I did have, and I probably didn't talk about that, but I had a whiteboard there with some questions for people to think about as they approached the project. I had all sorts of, so I had tables set out with chairs around them, and there were different books on each table, and there were different materials. And my student, Teresa Coleman, and I sat down and did a few things on pages so people could see the types of things they could do. And then we had another table with sample altered books on them so that people could look through those. They could have a conversation. And then what happens is some people would sit down and work. They might have had an hour. They might have had a half an hour. And they would come in and just want to do a little something. Some people came back all week. And so it's the type of thing where people drop in and out. So you have no idea how many people are coming. They would give us a little bit of time to eat in between. It was really quite crazy. So I had maybe, in addition to Teresa, I had 2 staff members from the Tate who were there to try to help, with supplies and things. Or I was running out, they would help me with stuff, like if the shaving cream was a mess and we needed to wipe it up and put a new batch down, that sort of thing. But I mean, some days it was mostly during the week. So it was like Monday through Friday. So it really wasn't on the weekend. That last Saturday was the day that people came back to talk about what they had made. But I will say, I don't know if I do it again. They kept track of it, and it was 1,800 people over the course of 5 days that came in and out of that space. And the day started at like 9, 10 o'clock and ended at 5. So we were there working with people for like a work day, you know, all day. I would say if you're a person who has done teaching with young people, or you know, been like a K-12 teacher, it still would have been a little nerve-wracking for you. But I wouldn't recommend anybody doing that if they'd never done a community project before, because I've never worked with that many people in my life in 1 week. But it was really quite an amazing thing. And then BCU actually brought some people over from their board and treated us to a fancy dinner, and they were there. They wanted to talk to me. I'm like, look, you know, I'm in the middle of this. You can help, you know, if you want. So I think it was really good for them to see what the power of art can do and how people were really involved in it. So I would say that was a bit chaotic because it was during the summer school break. So I probably had more children than maybe some other folks had with their weeks, but people did all sorts of things. You didn't have to do what I was doing necessarily. You might have been able to do something that was more a thought project, or, you know, that little film shows you some of the different things that institutions and artists did during their week. But yeah, I'm not even sure if I can tell you how to organize it. All I knew was I've done that sort of thing many times with smaller groups, and I knew how to set up the room, and I knew what was in the room. So I was running around a bit, but I was glad to have my student with me to help, and 2 other people. I don't know if that really answered the question, but
Thanks, Pamela. Are there any other questions or comments? And if you don't want to send it in a chat, feel free to also ask it yourself. I can ask another question, Pamela. So I know you said you were sort of were anticipating that maybe the youth's artwork would be sad after that first meeting, and I think it was kind of touched on in the video a little bit, and you did too. But what were some of the things that that they did make artwork about, and did it turn out? Did any of them turn out being sad, or were they happy, or yeah?
it was really interesting because like I say, they were aged 12 to 19. Some were from Southeast Asian countries, some were from different countries in Africa. And, you know, so they had their own little thing too going on. And you know, they would get into little things with each other, but it wasn't about that. It was just usual kind of kids teasing each other kind of thing. But that day when I was going to meet them, I had been before to see the space and meet with the director. And she was the one who suggested that I come back one Saturday when they were, you know, doing some other things. Because like I said, they were not involved in art at all, which I thought was interesting. There was a gardening program there. They did a little bit with that. They did group outings together, but they were not doing any art, which was so unusual because it was an art center where they were located. So what the day that I went, the Saturday that I went just to meet the children who would be working with me, these 2 councilwomen were there. And I was like, oh, maybe maybe I'll just be quiet and sit over here and see what's going on. And I don't know what prompted them to come in and speak to them, but that suburb of Edinburgh, I guess the housing there was a little bit more affordable than in the city of Edinburgh, and so a lot of people migrating to Scotland, to Edinburgh, were in that neighborhood, and it kind of changed the racial makeup of the neighborhood a bit. And I think people who had been living there for many years were a little bit unsettled by this influx of people from different countries. And I thought, wow, because typically my work is more in line with not just youth, but with older adults and adults, middle-aged adults, you know, kind of like an intergenerational project. So I was hoping to try to maybe get their parents or somebody to come in as well on those Saturdays. But once I sat there and, I was trying to think about how could I get people from the neighborhood in there so that they could kind of de-escalate some of the tension. But once I got to meet them and I was listening to the councilwoman ask them questions about how they were doing, and they started talking about all these horrible things, the way they were being treated, I thought, you know what? They don't really need to interact with folks from the neighborhood right now. What they really need is an art outlet for them to heal and to tell their stories and to be listened to and heard and affirmed for who they are as people. And so that was an eye-opening thing for me, because I was thinking, oh, one way to heal this is, to have people come in and make art together and have a conversation. But that was not the best thing for them. And as a result, instead of them, taking those stories that they were telling these councilwomen and creating these art pieces about the hardships they were having, they just that was their idea to make it a more upbeat and positive thing, to think about how people should treat people. I was really blown away by that. I thought, yeah, this is what adults need to hear. They need to listen to these kids. And I think things are better now. I mean, the people that I worked with are all gone. The director has moved on to something else. But they have more programming. I don't know how much art programming they do, but they have a lot of other programming there. I can only hope that the neighborhood has become a little bit more accepting of the immigrants who've moved in. But I don't know. All I can say is I hope that, those youth will go on and continue to think positively and try to make an impact on others.
Thanks, Pamela. We have a couple more questions in the chat. The first one says, Pamela, what a great talk. Thanks. Your pedagogy of trust in allowing them to follow their desires and make their own mistakes without someone telling them that they did something wrong. When I taught zines, I used to let everything go and let the students use language and freedom. My question, is it ever hard not to take a directorial approach sometimes?
I guess it could be. So since I'm a person who has been a high school teacher and I've been a college professor, some of the projects that I've worked on where I've had my students who were teachers working with people in community and working with youth and parents, it got a little bit hairy because as teachers, they were used to being a little bit more authoritarian, but I'm like, this isn't a school setting. This is the community. This is where they come when they don't want to think about the school setting, right? So I think that when you think about freedom of speech and things like that, and I'll give you a good example, the woodcut project that I did in DC in a community arts center there with my students from the Corcoran at the time and my colleagues, students from the University of Maryland, and the folks who were in the community at the Arc, which is where the project took place. It was interesting because I mixed the groups up purposely. So I had youth from the community with teachers from the Corcoran and teachers from the University of Maryland all working on the project together. And one boy, I remember one teenager wanted to put a gun in the piece. And it wasn't because he was glorifying gun violence or anything like that, but he was trying to make a point with his part of this woodcut they were creating. And the two teachers in the group who were students of mine said, you can't put a gun in there. And it all became about this whole, and his mother was also in the group and she said, nobody censors my son and his art. They don't do that here. And I said, sometimes, if you're a teacher and you're trained to think about what's the rules are, in a school setting, it's hard to step back when you're not working in that setting and let people just do what they need and want to do. And so that was a lesson that I think everybody learned in that instance, that, oh, wait a minute, I'm not in my classroom, this isn't my student. I really shouldn't try to tell them how to censor their art. And they worked it out. They decided as a group not to put the gun in there, but they talked it out. So I think that's part of it. I think that sometimes as a teacher, our training is that, we want to facilitate things for students, but we also have to have these rules in place. And that's not what this was about. So, I mean, I was happy that they didn't want to make it about sad things, but if that's what they wanted to get that out, I mean, I would have been fine with that. I wouldn't have told them, to do something different.
Thanks. Our next question is, what is the greatest result you have seen from your community artivism?
The greatest result. I think watching people who maybe didn't think much about the power of art have a light bulb go off and see, oh wow, this is really something that is amazing. It might change people's thoughts about things. And one example I can give is that same project with the woodcuts. There was a woman who wanted to be involved, but she had no interest in making a woodcut whatsoever. And this again is where, as a teacher, you think about, you have a lesson plan. Everybody's supposed to do these things, right? You can't do that with the community. You can't tell an adult what they can or can't do, right? And so I said, well, what would you like to do? And this is the whole thing. It's about the people you're working with, not about you. You're providing them with a medium to express themselves, but it's really about what they want to do with it. And she said, well, I don't want to cut in any wood, but I would like to make a film. So I said, a film, okay. And I happened to have a photojournalism student working with me, and the two of them sat down and they interviewed people who were working on the project, and they made a film. And it was amazing. This person kind of directed the whole thing, made the film, and it became a part of what we exhibited afterwards. And she certainly put in the elbow grease to help with the printing. She just didn't want to make anything like that. She didn't want to cut anything. So I think a lot of this has to do with talking to folks. And I have to say, I see that Jing is on the call. Jing, who was working with me out there in Edinburgh. Hi, Jing. So yeah, I think you just have to be you have to be willing to step back and let go of control. I think that's part of the hardest thing. I mean, what you want to do is make sure that people know how to use the material safely, right? But once they get that, you want to be able to get out of the way.
Great. Okay. The next question is, starts with a compliment. You do such beautiful work, Pamela. Thanks for sharing. I would love to hear more about how you initiated and facilitated the conversations about sharing stories with your artists in Scotland. How did you create a space with strangers where they felt safe and comfortable to share? Was it all through the joy of art making and the paper exploration, or through group discussions or journal prompts, etc.?
This is a really good question. So I always say there's two ways you can do this. One way is it's generated from the group, and that's when you have a lot more time. You just ask a bunch of questions, and then the big ideas that people want to work on are generated from the group, and they decide what they want to work on. So I only had 5 weeks, one session a week. And so I, in thinking about after sitting in on the talk that they had with the council women, I thought, well, this sounds like belonging would be a good big idea for them to work around. So I kind of came up with the big idea for them, what belonging meant for them, whatever that meant. And so what I did was I started with a word web, and I'm sorry, I know I went through that really fast, but we had a big sheet of paper with belonging in the center. And then they just kind of riffed off of that. People talked about, what belonging meant to them, what words they associated with that, what actions, what ways of being and feeling. And so then we had this whole big word web, and then people looked at that to think about how they might want to visualize their story. And as I said, I had some example artist books that I had done with other youth groups here in the US, in Richmond and DC. And they looked at those as a model and thought, well, I like the way this book, the structure of this, but I want mine to be about this. I think I want it to be about the ways people, my proverbs that I want people to think about, or I want it to be about my life story and where I'd like to see myself going. So that's why I showed you the film, so that you could see that each person took a different take on what belonging meant for them. And that was fine. That's what I wanted them to do. So I start with a word web, and I either start by asking them questions for them to generate the theme and then create the word web, or I start with the theme and they riff off of that. And then the second thing I do is to really get them involved is I give them a really simple thing that's crazy and fun and anybody can be successful at. So like the shaving cream marbling. It's messy, but they get really excited when they see what they could do, like with paste paper and all these different things. And so then they had all that decorative paper, and then they started thinking about what they wanted, how they wanted to use it. So we talked about how to structure an accordion book. And then they just kind of went from there. So I think if you start with things like that, that gives them a chance to incubate and think about what they want to visualize. And they change their mind while they're working on it too. You know, like as they're putting the book together, they start thinking again about what they want the content on those pages to be. So part of that happens from discussions with each other too, and looking to see what other people are doing.
Okay, the last question we have is, what is one thing you would do if you were able to contact one or more of the young artists that you worked with during your time in Glasgow, but you were in Edinburgh, right?
Yeah, I was in Edinburgh. I think that I would just ask them if they still make art, if they use art as a form of expression, what they thought about that project now, so many years out. Would they like to do it again? You know, I think I would ask them those sorts of questions, how they felt about art as a means of expressing their concerns or ideas, you know, because a lot of people will write or, you know, do different things. But I'm really curious as to whether or not they are engaged in art activities at all still.
Great. Thank you, Pamela. Well,
Sure.
I
Can I ask Jing if
yeah,
Jing, do
yeah.
you have anything you want to add because you were very much involved in that project?
Oh, hi, Pam, and
Hi,
everyone.
Jing.
Hello. Oh, thank you for inviting me. Like you said, Artstories UK is a very inspiring research project, and I really enjoyed working with you and the people as Scotland community. Um, I don't have any question to ask at the moment because I think I've asked you a lot of questions already. But I think it's a wonderful project, and then was really happy to participate. Well, thank you.
Jing is in China, so I know it must be very early in the morning there. And she, I'm trying to remember what exactly, she was a doctoral student and not really in art, but she is very artistic. And she was teaching the students how to do a lot of stuff with cut paper, which was so amazing. And so it was very wonderful to have her to work with and to meet her. So I thank everybody for coming. It was so nice to see people. I see some of my former students and faculty colleagues and artist friends. Thank you for coming and sharing this with me.
Yeah, thank you everyone so
Casey.
much. And thank you, Jing, for joining from China. Wow.
I know. I haven't seen her since 2019, so it was nice to come on.
Thanks, everyone. And I just want to, before we close out, let everyone know our November Book Art Series talk will be on November 14th. And it will be about a collaboration between Itai Rogers-Fett, who's a printmaker and arts educator, and Yael Horowitz, who is a scholar practitioner of Yiddish performance. So that should be an interesting talk about their collaboration. So please join us in a month. And thank you, Pamela, and everyone else.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye.